I think it works. They told me they hear me, so it's yeah. So this for Q&A.
I have already this one.
And how does the clicker work? Okay.
Okay, so thank you for being here for another lecture in the Graphic Elisava series. It's always a pleasure to see the full room. So today we have Studio Airport, Bram Brorse and Moritz Wouters. And well, I don't know if they like what I'm about to say, but I think that sometimes when we think about Dutch design, we have some stereotypes already in our minds, but I think that they fall totally out of this stereotype that somebody could think of Dutch design. And also I think that their practice is relevant. Today we had the pleasure to have them in a design crit for the editorial digital design project in the editorial design master, and we have them tomorrow also for the magazine design project. And it's not by chance, it's because I think that they I guess we will see that today, but they have really been able to master this specific area of editorial design, both on screen and on paper. And also I think it's going to be also, I'm very curious because I know less that part, but how they include film and audiovisual in their project. So I think that you want to hear them more than me. So welcome, Bram and Moritz. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. We're eager to tell a bit about our projects, what we do, who we are at Studio Airport, and starting with the team, because it's not just Maurits and myself. We have a team of 6 in-house designers, where we work from Utrecht in our studio. This is the place.
One of the corners.
Another corner.
This is the book design place, and this is the digital space. It is. You see?
So we'll get into it a bit later, but we work with a range network of freelancers. But this is our core team. On the right, Johanna from Austria. In the middle, Sam. She originates from the Netherlands. Anje on the right. And Karsten from Germany, who is the longest with us. And that is the core team where we do only the design with. And we got named Agency of the Year last year by the European Design Awards, which was super cute in Naples. So how did we start it? We started in 2011, graduated both from the art academies in Utrecht, University of the Arts, in graphic design, but both with quite a different discipline and interest. Maurits has his fascination in printed matter, book design, editorial design, and myself, I'm more leaning towards cinematography, film, motion design. But those worlds meet in graphic design, and the outcome diverges in different media, whether that's digital, physical, and in installations. But the universe that surrounds us, and that's partly by the assignments that we gained over the past decade, but also out of our own interest, have become more crystallized. Starting with the editorial world, we're working a lot for magazines, editorial platforms. Ecology, science is more a subject that comes back in many of our projects. Art, culture, luckily more and more. That's also what we sometimes try to push for. If we feel one goes too much in one direction, we want to steer the other way. And then there's a bit of a branch between hospitality, fashion, lifestyle assignments that also come back in the studio. And then we have our team that everyone gravitates around.
Around us in the middle.
And that's only the core design team, so that's 6, that's us. But then there's a whole ecosystem of collaborators that we work with. The most important one being September Digital. They do all our coding, so all the development is done by them. That's 15 programmers, they're at the other side of Utrecht. Then we have printers, of course, that we do the magazines and book designs with. Music designers, motion designers, artists, but also really important, the editorial teams who we on almost daily basis work with. Because creating a magazine with a design team and editorial team asks for a really close collaboration. And often they are set in the US, so that means that we have these meetings for us in the afternoon at 4, 5, 6, and then have quite the harder, difficult discussions. So we got used to that. As Mark said, it's nice that you pointed it out. We don't maybe fit into the Dutch design. Not sure if it's a coincidence, but we also don't work that much in the Netherlands. We currently have one client in the Netherlands, and the rest is actually US.
They don't ask us.
They don't ask us. They don't like us.
Never happened.
But it's like 80% US based, and then there's a bit in the UK and otherwhere in Berlin and otherwhere in Europe. We have some clients, but so taking you through a decade project, because we started already for quite a while.
So this is kind of a warm-up from all small visuals, illustrations and design work from small scale to larger that we create, and we put them together just to warm up a little bit into the presentation. So you can click through. Yeah, this is like, okay. That was a smiley. So over the years, I think you can click through. This is just, we have been working for the editorial platforms online and in print, and mostly Emergence magazine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. We are supportive in their visual language and their whole branding and their whole identity, and also supportive of their visual stories that they publish. Smaller identities, or I mean the foundation of Emergence magazine called Calliope Foundation. They are based on the intersection of the Pacific and the North American tectonic plate. And you can see there's a small strip of land that is actually separated because of that plate from the North American land. And therefore it's pretty special, and what they ask us to do is to highlight this into their identity. And how can we create a compelling way into creating a geographic more body of work that tells in a poetic way their story. And they do a lot in their area because of their history, the American history that they're really engaged with.
I think what was a challenge here is that we like to work quite type-based, typographically based, and they really were keen to having a logo with a visual. So we started this research on the overlap of the tectonic plates, and that ended up in these paper cuts. And then you also see how that comes back in the digital design where you have small interactions, how these paper cuts also work and give meaning. Besides that, the website it's also really needs to be established, trustworthy, so it's very clean UX based, but with the spice of these more organic, handwritten, hand-drawn shapes.
Normally we do, when we create a logo, we like to keep it typography based, and they wanted something visual, like an icon or something. So we had a real large research into what it will become, and it got really simple in the end. But the simple end result is really about that intersection of these tectonic plates that is so important for them.
This was a large-scale exhibition that we did in London, end of 2023. And besides taking part in the exhibition, we also do the whole branding, the campaign. So that's a bit of a sub-identity within the Emerging Magazine realm, which is a bit more art-driven. And in this specifically case, the theme was shifting landscapes. And we came through these astronomical shapes, swarms, that represented that in a really minimal way. How we like to work with material in print in a really small gestures.
Yeah, I think this is in also to show they had a really small budget. They wanted to have a handout. How can you create something with a small budget that still looks and feels kind of on quality? So we use this outside paper that is very high in transparency, print this type on it, and then you have this outcome or product that is kind of feels as a quality piece rather than just a pamphlet or some, So in budget-wise, that's interesting to see how it can, minimize your, but therefore also to crystallize them.
What did we do here?
Yeah, this for a fashion brand. So this is more about expressive typography, and some moments we click play here, sorry, because it gets stuck. I think it's really about, as a studio, finding the moments of when can we create playful, bit more funky, quirky things, and when does it need to be more serious and, of a lower intensity, let's say.
Personal challenge for you?
My aunt, she's an artist, and she asked me to create a book, and it took us a year with 50 sessions. And then in the end, she was happy with the cover, and I wasn't. It was not this one, another one. And I invited her to my house, and she was completely overwhelmed with everything. And I had the laptop open to present this new one. And she was like, I think we just have to go for this, and it's okay, it's been a difficult road, but let's go. And she almost wanted to leave my house, and I said, I just have one more thing I want to show you. And then I showed it to her, and she was like, oh my God, this is it. So it's a nice anecdote of working with someone that's really close to you. Comes with a lot of emotion.
These are just sketches, form explorations that we do when we create logo and logo types.
I've been doing quite some LP covers for Slapfunk Records, and it's really just an exercise of ingredients that I have somewhere stacked, that I have in the background that I want to use somehow, somewhere, and this is a really good place to just combine them and put them on a printed, in a printed surface. And what started with something that I thought would take a week took me almost 2 months to sharpen this typography.
But it's been quite a joy. They're friends from us, and we started in 2013. So 2 creative houses, one from design, one from music. And we've been doing their brand identity, the LP covers.
You can go
campaigns.
one back?
Yeah, sure.
One more, like this one, like the day before I started to work on this, I saw a vase from Picasso, and he had these things there. And by myself, I would never, I don't know if you know, but...
No, I don't know. He doesn't.
By myself, I would never draw these, but maybe because he did it, I felt like this was my inspiration. So I took it with me. It's not one-to-one, but it's just more like, just to also dare to take something that you like and kind of pull it into this time and this world. And the same for this. I've been to Indonesia and I found an object which hold that drawing. And I was really fan of it. And then there was a moment that I photographed it and I saw that it would fit into a circle shape. So I would have loved to have been drawing this, but it's actually not mine. It's probably even a few hundred years old because it's from an antique vase also. And yes, I like to speak about it, to be honest about it. So I don't want to just use someone else, but I know it's really an old artifact, and I just like that you all see it now, and that this has been taken from a jungle space where I found it into the world where we live in. And it's a nice example of when you draw or when you do things that don't necessarily relate or on purpose for a certain project, they can finally or eventually find their way into your design work, because this was a drawing which was just a drawing, and then making something, this came in and now inverted it, and then these shapes actually found its place onto here. So what is the nice thing of being a designer? I think you can create your own, like I would encourage to create your own collection, you know, of things, and not only typefaces in a folder at home or on your desktop, but mostly things that you can walk around in your house, a poster, a book, a vase, something that you like, because eventually it will find its way into your work. Not necessarily meaning like literally as this, but more, you know, it shapes you into creating your own taste, and therefore you can be a better curator, which is almost the essence of a graphic designer, I would say.
So these are more commercial commissions. As I said, we do quite some things in the hospitality sector. This was for a landscape hotel in Zion National Park. And for here we also tapped from the National Archive to just have this old footage that we combined with handwritten elements and a more contemporary layout. These are examples of the Slapfunk brand identity, which also involves a lot of fun motion design. Like each year when we do a campaign, it's just a pleasure to see how far we can extend the identity. It's already quite old in our opinion, like, but it grew over us with the years, and we try to develop it each time. Another fun project that we did 2 years ago is this app called Switchlit, which we did the whole branding and also the app building for. It's basically an app that invites you to write a story with someone that you don't know. So you start a paragraph, and then the other person that's anonymous also writes the other paragraph in response to that, and then so on, until you both decide that you finish the story, and those get published. So it's really a tool for the imaginative writing. For, I think, 5 or 6 years in a row, we had the honor to create the recruitment campaign for our own academy, for the University of the Arts Utrecht. This was the second one, where it was a really hard assignment, because the communication office of the University of the Arts is quite distracted from the actual art world. And it was difficult to convince them about certain moves that we want to make. But we studied there, and our name as a studio was connected to it, so we really wanted to push things. And I think over the years we learned how to play them a little bit, but that was actually, it was workarounds. Like, it was always a bit of a social hustle.
It was just like, we don't want to make compromises, right? And I think what we do in all the work is we have a question from the client, and we want something, and there's a compromise somehow you need to make, but we try to kind of hide it by good design work. But this, it was almost not doable to hide compromises, because there was a board with so many opinions and everyone wanted to take their part. So there were even things that we kind of mentioned afterwards or in the last presentation, because strategically we thought it's better to just, you know, focus on what we think is important. So it was like a complicated client process, yeah.
And still, what was interesting, like, so I think it's the biggest art institute of Europe. So they have the conservatorium, music and technology, theater, and these are all different buildings, visual arts, design. So to balance that feel of all these different stakeholders, that was also a nice challenge. This was, I think, the third year where we started to come with a motion concept, really based out of film, where we did 180 degrees around the persons, but then did the same thing around their work to mirror that world of, you know, the thinkers and their eventual creations, and that led to the specific style campaign. And the year after, it was really about the quantity of students, the richness, the diversity, the inclusivity. So we went way more on a personal level. And this was the last campaign that we did, which I think we felt was eventually the strongest, as it was really combining an editorial concept in which we had interviews with the students, published them on the magazine, and then had actually a short film that we created, but that was translated into the campaign with the type, so that you could feel back, for example, these kind of visuals.
This is Utrecht, by the way.
Yeah.
So a lot of bikers.
A lot of bikers. Small motion explorations for a nightclub in Amsterdam that we did lovely. I'm gonna skip a bit through the Slowness, another hospitality brand. And we're currently working on a redesign, so that's often with these long-term clients, it's quite nice that you grow with them over the years. So now this is not published yet, but this is what we're currently working on. That's then the 2.0 version of their website and identity. And you just learn so much from creating a platform once that the second time that you do it, it actually becomes really interesting. And we've now been in this cycle with a couple clients. With Emerge Magazine we did this, with Slowness, with a couple others, and it just gives so much more insight because you already did the job once and you know what the problems were that you run into. Sapiens, an anthropology magazine about everything human in the US. This is a bit more of a approachable, generic style, I would say, that speaks to a broader audience. They have over 2 million visitors a month, so that's a way broader spectrum that we have to cover. Website where we combine actually the editorial layer, which is way more printed aesthetic, with a super highly UX milk glass navigation layer over it to really make a clear distinction between these two worlds. It needs to work really well, but you also want to have a pleasant, warm reading experience. We've been working last year on a kind of personal project in collaboration with Mirelli van Tulder. An art film that actually tries to give a voice to all the artifacts, objects and art that are in the depot of the World Museum in the Netherlands, which is basically stolen art out of our colonial time. For, I think, only 3% is on display, so the other 97% is in these depots, and they're really hard to visit. There's only like 10 scientists allowed, and we got the chance to film there for weeks. So it was a really special project to us. This was a teaser that we created with all the labels that are hanging there. I think we have the trailer here. The film will be screening or opening end of March.
We have a past. No present, no future.
I'm going to give you the clicker to start.
So, from the Heart Island to Emerge magazine, yes. The Heart Island magazine, the Heart Island project, sorry. This came in 2012, this email to us. We just started the studio, and we were doing many things, but not something like this. It was an email with a public cemetery, 60,000 people listed, burial records, from Melinda Hunt from New York. She reached out to us and we said, yes, sure, we are specialized in clear web designs, straight out of the box thinking, and we have design solutions for you. But we were pretty overwhelmed by this email, and we never heard about Heart Island. And so, for the rest of America and the world, it's an island in front of the coast of the Bronx, and this has been a public cemetery over, I think, 100 years, and there's buried more than 1 million people, so it's a mass grave. And Melinda Hunt has been working from her beginning in her, she's an artist, fine art artist, and she's been working with her own personal work in relation to this cemetery to create it, at least to put it on the map, because people should know about this, and to create eventually access for relatives to visit their people that are buried there. These are photos that she took together with Joel Sternfield, early 90s, and this was her first try to kind of publish something that then moves into the world and people will become aware of what's going on there. And through her art, she worked, and it's actually her life goal to create a whole accessibility for this island for everyone to visit and to also encounter American history that is actually being buried there. So I think there was a moment that she felt, so these are the plots, and these are baby caskets that are every 10 years are being renewed. And the prisoners from Rikers Island, they work and do everything there because the island is from and used by the Department of Corrections. So that also is a reason that it's not accessible for anyone. So we have New York here, and when we zoom in, it's this little strip. And you see there's some barracks, but there's nothing else there. And you even notice the stripes in the grassland where the sections and the plots where all these barriers are placed. That's also, yeah, here this is the Potter Field, it's called. And every day, inmates from Rikers Island, they go there with a ferry and work there. So this is her attempt, or actually analog artwork that wanted to put this, obscure history on the map. And this has a limitation, and she felt, okay, how can I move this, including the burial records, in order to people to find their relatives? How can we move this onto a digital space where we can search for people, and we can create an environment which is called now the Traveling Cloud Museum, an environment that we can be engaging with what is going on there, and that is a compelling way to interact with this into something that might grow and create more awareness for the rest of the world. These are the burial records that are lost and missed and burned because there was a fire on the island. And these are some photos that are still there from the archive that she actually sent with us to work with. So this was the logo that we created. So actually the upside down world, like the not understandable perspective to what's going on there. She connected with us, which was a bit of, you know, a doubt for us. Why do you want to connect with someone overseas and why not closer to you, New York? And I think in the end it was more that we create or we operate more in a conceptual way. And she wanted something, we call it museaal in Dutch, it's like more museum-like. She's really a fine art artist. She wanted to have a space where you come and you dwell and you move through the stories and the history, and mostly, you know, through the whole experience of what's going on there. And she wanted us to add a layer to it, to just not, you know, lay it out as an editorial or storytelling platform. How can we create a way that people start to interact? So what we did is, I think the most important thing is that every individual there is buried, and they're buried maybe 100 years ago or 60 years ago, and you want to take them out of their anonymity because they are buried and no one knows about it. So we connected a clock to the moment, to that person, and the moment in which it was, on the moment it was buried. So these clocks are ticking, and you can, as a visitor, you can engage and you can connect and you can add a story in what shape you would like, fiction, non-fiction, a poem, photos, etc., to give an identity again to this person, and you stop the clock from ticking. And this was the design back then. And
Something went wrong.
something went wrong here. Too much design in here. But we
also-
just, sorry. Now we took on this project because we just didn't want to miss this, but at the same time we didn't have the skills to do it. So, but then eventually it goes like that. 2 years later, we did a 2.0 version, and we created this out of it. Now if I look at it, we would do it all over again, of course. But the nice thing is that this is now an ongoing project that is becoming larger and larger. If you go there, heartisland.net, you will find many stories, many clocks that are still ticking, but many that are stopped. And she created also the accessibility for visitors to come to the island, and that people actually can find the relatives that they are buried that they didn't know about, because the people that are buried there are most people that are died in anonymity and didn't have the chance to go to a funeral, or dead born babies that are found on the street, like a lot of in criminal corners, mostly. So it's a really dark side of America that she, through this project, sheds light on.
This is how the current database looked like. And what is maybe a small detail to add is that that database was not accessible beforehand. She had to really file a lawsuit against the government of New York to make this database accessible. So the moment we published this website, it was not groundbreaking, but it was really for the first time that there was access to these burial wrecks. So families for the first time could dive in and search whether their loved ones was buried there. Because there's a lot of people that don't know if your uncle, let's say your uncle is traveling 2 weeks to New York, he doesn't come back, he died there. He's probably on that island, but you never know for sure. So that's what this platform also offered. Here you see the plots.
So now you can live move over the island and see, you see the amount of people buried there. You click on it and you have the list, and you can add a story.
And again, you see the clocks ticking everywhere for a certain amount of years. And in a plot, like here, most of those plots are buried like 38 years ago, so they all are 30 years ago, but it could also be 2 days. Like if you go through the database, you find all timings of people when they died. And this is the current plans from an architectural landscape architects that are making plans now to make the park really public, because still, you know, there's planned visits sometimes with family members, but it's still not accessible for the public, and that's Melinda's goal. And hopefully, in a way, we can also contribute to that in the future. But it's been an essential project to
It was our
kickstart.
first real storytelling platform, and I really appreciate how she, through the arts, wanted to put this in the light.
And the title of this chapter was from Hard Island Project to Emerge magazine. And we want to emphasize this because it's really a red thread of that project, how that led through our career. Because as you can imagine, Melinda Hunt, she's an artist, she did a lot of press coverage and did a lot of interviews. And one of those interviews was on national radio. And at the other side, on the West Coast, Hannah was driving in her car through the hills of Northern California. And she was listening to that interview. And she looked up the website and was so moved by it, looked up who designed it, then called us, asked if we wanted to do an interactive documentary about the prison system on the West Coast in St. Quentin, where there were different programs happening with a more Buddhist vision, but just bringing a bit more humanity to the terrible system there in the US. Think of veggie courtyards, art workshops, meditation sessions. And it was really a privilege to work on this, creating with filmmakers, writers, visiting also these programs. There was one man in Amsterdam currently present when we were working on that. But what is really important is that due to that project, our network in the West Coast, in California, grew. And one of the key persons that we collaborated with was Emmanuel Vaughan Lee, a film director. And over the years, we did a couple projects together. And then I think it was 2017 that he gave us a call and said, Maurits, Bram, do you want to create a magazine from the ground up with me? I have a name and a theme. It's set around ecology, spirituality, and culture. And it's going to be called Emerge Magazine. And for the rest, we can think it all out. So we came to California, visited him, had a week of brainstorming, and then, built the whole platform. What you're going to see now is already the current version, the 2.0 version that we did in 2021. So this is still our most important collaboration with clients.
Fermentation and civilization are inseparable, and it's absolutely true. It is almost autopoetic. It was self-creating. People stumbled upon these techniques.
Around and after the violence, Soviet scientists mapped these hills and rivers, analyzed their plants, plotted migration routes to optimize reindeer nutrition.
Despite the subtleties and complexities of studies and reports, scientific predictions of ecological collapse,
As the earth, with its unerring instincts, rebalanced itself in the luxury of a world without humans.
Is a new hybrid character. The mystery is to think beyond what we see.
A very, very sobering look
You see this beautiful little blue marble in the middle of all that darkness, and you realize how lonely we really are on this wonderful earth.
So basically, Emerge Magazine is a digital magazine where we publish podcasts, films, essays, poems, long read interactives, an annual printed edition. But it's also a platform where we can publish, you know, stories that are contributed, but also we as Studio Airport publish films and stories on it. Another important aspect is we create supportive illustrations, artworks for the essays, which is an extremely nice playground for our studio to each time, you know, on an artistic level develop. That could be just one designer, could be a team effort. It can be small personal things that one always wanted to try and examine.
Yeah, because they have their target vision, but they have all these stories that they publish. So they ask us, read this story and create a visual for it. What can it be? And they have been so important for us because they really pushed us into this artistic corner that we have to dig in. And sometimes we don't know how to find another, way of creating a visual for a story that are aligning all pretty much close to each other and are even around the same theme in some moments. So, we really just push and push, and sometimes the solution can lay in something really small like that is then scanned and blown up and finally finds its way to a spread or an opening title page.
Yeah, the magazine shaped us on many aspects, on artistic level, also thinking editorially on that level, working so closely with their editorial team. We've also been doing physical events like this exhibition in Melbourne, set around the trees, and a bigger one, Shifting Landscape, in London. And one of the, I would say, most beautiful commissions that we got was the framework was, guys, can you create a story about regenerative agriculture in Europe? Go. So that's when we start to brainstorm, come with ideas. And one of our team members, Andrzej, he's from Slovenia, and he told us, like, hey guys, I think something interesting is going on in my country around beekeeping. So maybe we can look into that. So that's when we started the research process there. And along the way, we found out that the story should not be about beekeeping, but about pollinators, and especially wild pollinators in general, because they are threatened and harmed in their habitat, and highly valuable for all sorts of vegetations and a healthy ecosystem. We started already, like we were used to do with Emerge Magazine, designing these long reads. We already have these toolkits, running text, quotes, interactions.
Boring.
Boring. Illustrations. But what is interesting is that this we did upfront before the actual film production. And we just had a session with students, and one of our feedback points was sometimes, let the content, be the leader in your decision making. So this is a typical case of where we wanted to try to already design upfront, and that's not always the right decision.
Well, at least it gave us a very good indication of what we don't want.
And it gave structure. Of course, there was an editorial structure, so that was very important. That was thought through, but the design not. This is to show how much fun we had. And then, we had all this footage, and it was shot with a vision. That being said, that we had photography. Maurits was doing the still photography. We had 2 cinematographers, a lot of drone shots, and we shot with an ARRI, which is a huge camera, on portrait mode. We already felt like that could be interesting to use, and that's quite uncommon to turn that camera 90 degrees. And we also shot with minimal camera movement, because we learned in other projects that if you have a film shot and it's combined with 2 images, the less movement there is in the camera, actually the more magical it becomes, because it becomes a moving image rather than a film shot. And it becomes also something that just plays and can loop, rather than something that, at 30 seconds needs to restart. So we're in the car back from Slovenia, and we felt like we have these amazing interviews with these peoples. And are we now going to translate that by a copywriter that writes text? And we, no, that didn't feel right. Constructing a whole story.
Experience.
Yeah. So then the idea came, can we create a kind of podcast experience with a visual film narrative as well? And basically this model explains it. The white dot is the audio narrative that just plays, as you know, an audio player. And then there's the viewport icon, and that is where you are in the scrolling narrative, the film and photography. And those two actually can be played with. Like when they overlap, they're in the sweet spot, but you can just get in your own pace, be quicker or slower as you see fit. These are design executions of the titling pages. As we know, they are highly important because that's what's being shared on the web. That's when you launch your project that people will look at. So we try a lot with the team, and we don't take this lightly, as you see. So there's a lot of sketching involved, more sketching, and then eventually ending up here. This is the homepage, the viewport, where you have the 5 different episodes. And here we get a glimpse in how that works. It's a very cinematic experience, obviously. We also had to cover loading times because it's so heavy. We're really stretching what was technically possible. So in that loading time, we had an analog photo sequence to preload. But here you see a little bit how it works. You scroll over these vertical shots, and the vertical ones are actually really nice also in film because you explore, you're really in the image. And then the question came to translate this to a physical installation in London. And because we had shot already in portrait, we felt like, okay, what if each episode would be on a portrait screen and they would together form a sculpture, a prism?
This is episode 4, Humming of Cities and Bees. In this episode of Pollinators of Slovenia, we move to the green pocket-sized capital of Ljubljana. On the unlikely rooftop of a concert hall, we discover a beekeeper producing rich, pure honey. While in a city park, we learn how all of us can help keep healthy habitats for bees in urban environments. We begin with the concert hall rooftop.
What is interesting about this was thought of a large screen, so the subtitle is in the center of the screen, so it's more an eye item, way more prominent. So we also try to redefine conventions in film and in graphic design. So basically the narrative just almost scrolls on as you go. So it's a different way of experiencing a film and a photo essay. And that came together in this installation. Other art installations, interactive stories that we did together with Marshmallow Liesevest, also published on Emerge magazine. A more meditative experience where you really get
Where
talked through
do you end and the world begins? It begins with breath, the syllables of starlight, an ancient language of the cosmos.
So the work for Emerge magazine over the years has been online, digital, but also print. Left, you see a fiction bundle with fiction stories, a smaller one, really an intimate, smaller thing to go through. They also, the volumes, they go with practices. So there are pocket-size booklets that you bring with you in the natural world and do exercises. Like these two, this is an LP cover that you read a text and you listen to that really well composed song. the nice thing actually, and also the difficult part of Emerge magazine, that they never had a clear vision in where the identity should go to. That created each year for a new outcome in the volume for print, but also all other assets. And it's still a search, and I feel it's really a value of together not having the specific need of being super consistent in ingredients, but rather to have that voice, gradually evolving, but that voice is always, from the same source. And I think that's been the main, motivation in how we take decisions over the years. And this is a small move through ingredients that I call them what you pull into your design. So you have fonts, and for example, the Windsor that we use for a title page in one booklet finds its way also in a more navigational structure in a larger volume. And then in another volume, it comes in the end as the logo in the color font spot. Then you have a monospace that is then also being used there underneath in that previous booklet. So it's a mix-up, and like every time something new is being created, and I think that's, finding that spark or that sweet spot, but more even, try to limit maybe sometimes your palette because it will create more freedom. So a small version there, and then we blow it up, the mono. So it's actually all over. This one finds its way on the back side of that practice, but then we use the numbers and create a more of an artistic layering composition out of it. Or we place it in the spine. So we have made now 5 volumes. The first one is the best, and the last one, I would say. I think because the first we were really dedicated to create this first voice or the first aesthetic corner, and 2, 3, 4 we kind of tried different directions, but I think it all needs to have the journey to eventually arrive at where you're at. So I'm happy that these things also are a bit different than if I now look at it that I wanted. Number 5, that's from last year. Okay, we go through this one. This is number 1, is actually so remarkable because it has, all the stories have their own identity. So it's not one identity and you go through these stories and they fall under one frame. No, it's actually each story has almost a different paper, and you dive into a new world. Well, it's binded together in a book. So it also is for people really a large variety and very playful to go through. I think I don't know if you've seen previously a shot from this in the presentation, but we do a lot of adaptations from film into print. Emmanuel Vaughan-Lee, the executive director, he always questions us and challenges us. Yeah, he's a filmmaker. How can you translate my film into a print volume? And this is, for example, here you see the Earthrise photo that you see here, the really famous one. But then we had 300 gigabytes of NASA content. And we actually took that photo, but also all the photos there are taken 2 minutes before and 2 minutes after. So you actually expand that context of that photo. So this is one magazine, and you feel that this almost looks like an older novel, and here you go somewhere else. And so that's really like an exercise for us, how far we can push it. This is also visual material that we create on the glass with ink and paint to visualize these strong winds that move to Europe.
What is maybe good to add is that this was really a collection of everything that was published in the first year online. So basically the best of in the print. Later, from on the third edition, we changed the publishing model and it became print first. So there was way more conceptual thinking about what the print object would be, and then it would find its way online. So that's also natural to why these stories have their own identity, because they had their own identity online as well.
So number 5, I want to take you with this. It's about time, and they explored the vast mystery of time, and they asked us, can you create this volume that really embodies this? Yes, we can, but it's also quite a challenge and a big question, because if you look at the world of art, there's people who dedicated their whole life around this theme, in artwork that is not using graphic elements and storytelling. And how do you create something like this, an object that is static, you move through, and how can you create an experience of time? So we didn't want to grasp time, but we want to rather evoke an experience of what time is, and this phenomenon which is super abstract. And in the beginning we had a lot of ideas, but eventually it became very simple, because there was really easy to fall into cliches, I think. And what they researched in this book is not the calendar time as we know it. It's the geological time, the sacramental time, kingship time. They go really deep into the deep corners of time. Unlike the others, this whole volume is based on archival material. So the others has a lot of commissioned work, illustrators, photographers. This is archival material that we really like, because you can go into this world of existing material to shape your volume, to sculpt it into something that feels really good, and to shape the stories even to an extent that are surprising. To have 2 times the title is already a bit of a move, of a gesture, that when you hold it, you move the book itself in a circle. And their whole editorial vision and statement is actually how can we relate to the more natural world of time, and moving from a more linear to a circular, organical way. And that gesture already gives that in motion somehow. And I wanted to make something really timeless, even though that's super, what does that mean? But at least something that just whispers to you and is soft, and has a few gestures that might spark a feeling of what time is. And what we created is, if you can see time as this fabric that underlays our everyday reality, can we create a visual landscape that kind of translates this into your experience of moving through the book and reading the stories, and having actually a line that evolves to and multiplies and moves to a moment where it all clusters, and that moment of clustering, then from there it moves and actually diminishes and separates from that cluster moment and moves through the text. And you after a while, hopefully you would not see it anymore, but then you come to a moment and it's there again. So it's actually 2 narratives, visual narratives, that moves together. And it's finding this balance of, how much do you want this book to be about time, And I believe it's good to take a step back sometimes. And so what we also try to do, or not try, what we do is we work with recto verso and transparency in paper. And, instead of styling your design, we try to more be constructive. So one page tells us what to do on the next one, meaning the transparency actually tells us how white space can be encountered, and have elements set on those places that without the transparency would feel like white and empty, but with it, it's actually filled with a shade. So this is the space where we made it, and we drew 1,500 lines, and then we curated them into 400, and then we placed them in the book. Yeah, of course, you need to feel that this publication needed to take time to make it. It couldn't feel like a quick fix, right? Like, so we found this tactile gesture, the graphite line, that creates somehow an intimate relation with your reading experience. And it started as a long one. And there's now it's not really complex, but for us it was really a technical challenge to figure out how can the reading text, be intertwined with these lines, and that they can all move together. So the line height is set in a way that is not disturbing for reading, but also gives the possibility to have these lines run through it. And also playing with the idea of a spine and disappearing there and actually coming out on another moment, and like how, because there's also no page numbers, because page numbers actually, emphasize the linearity of your experience. And since a book is very static, like we took them away. In other words, Emmanuel Fagnoli, he said no page numbers. We were like, okay, we don't do it. But it makes sense. And like this lining also gave us another reasoning to take decisions, like this starting line of the titling for each story that moves into that, or moves from on that first column. And it's actually nice because that simple factor that just creates, many more possibilities to play with, and it all starts to resonate with each other. And there were moments of parts of a legenda, these small little blocks that were taken from a legenda from these artworks, and they just appear in this story, and we placed them there because we liked them, and that's just a reason enough. It felt good to have them there. And also, like, there's just this line, we have this black and white photography, people come to this story and they're like, oh, what is it, and that question is just enough already, I feel, to evoke that spark that is sometimes necessary. And here you can see, you notice how we place the lining in correlation with this type, and this is standing on this, so it's really like a building, and it's a lot of fun. And the same thing is that quote, it would be flying without those transparent blocks behind. And also the photography, the archival, it's all these lines, they kind of come back there as well in ways. And so you also delve yourself into corners that are very unexpected. Plus a new thing that you actually cannot create, or comes to you when things are in print, because this is laying on the next page with the transparency. All of a sudden it creates this grid, and I love these things, that you just, that the actual object then comes with so many more gestures that actually play a part in the whole design itself. This is the page where they all is on the fullest collision.
So I think this showed that Emerge Magazine really shaped the studio in a particular way. The tricky thing of having such an important client is that you're also asked for more of that aesthetic, right? So it's a bit nostalgic, it's very warm, it's very sophisticated. So we also felt we were in need of doing other projects that maybe were more contemporary. And luckily, Faber Futures out of London came to us with a question if we could create a brand from the ground up that would only produce and publish micro-based products. And they wanted to do the full branding with us, even the naming, campaigns, the whole e-commerce platform, the whole shebang. This was in because it was in one of our first calls. We always like to put in a couple things to raise a conversation, and this particular piece from Paul Clay, you know, started a dialogue with them that actually we felt a big connection there. Then to take away from, you know, these typical aesthetics that maybe belong sometimes to us, nostalgia, analog, etc. We created the do's and don'ts list with them. And that was always, you know, in the studio hanging while working on the project, because it's also hard to describe sometimes into words, what does futuristic mean to you? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to the client? So it's good to have a constant check-in and dialogue about your vocabulary with each other, because that eventually, I strongly believe, leads to a successful project. Now, this is sketches of logos. So that takes a while before you get to a point where you feel like, hey, here something maybe is happening. And this was the first time that we felt, okay, here something simple yet established is arriving. And we started to work with just placeholder images, starting to make a bit mock-ups, branded content. And then eventually it led to this logo system, which is inspired on the idea of Petri dishes, cell division, and microorganisms actually growing. So the motion concept was also highly important. And to also link to the lab feeling, we added these numbers, these codes that eventually were used for all the products that were featured on the platform. And for a brand launched in 2024, you know, we don't want to create one logo, you create a whole system, an ecosystem of logos, type only, labeling that can be used on clothing, one that can be used more on the web. And in addition, we also created a custom typeface. We called it the Yeast, and it's a dot matrix font. And here you see the different cuts. The inner dot one, we have the outer shapes, and the combined shapes where we use the dots together with them. And I mean, this is of course a more display typeface that we're only using for more branding, visual purposes. But it's super fun to play also here with motion design, because you right away make that connection about bacteria growing out of their Petri dishes. Here you see how it's combined with different typefaces. This is also the Yeast, the same typeface, but then set vertically, and it creates almost this unknown scientific futuristic language that's not legible. It's there for a vibe. So, for example, that shirt is dyed in bacteria. So that's how it gets its color. And we were in charge of the whole art direction of both the studio photography, the photo shoots on site, and the branded material, posters. And like with, because we have that experience from Emerge magazine, we always offer our clients to also create a storytelling component to their website, which in the end turned out to be this magazine, where you get a glimpse behind the creation of the product, studio visits to the product designers, etc. This is the e-commerce platform. And we got the chance to create a launch trailer for the brand, because when it was launched, it needed to be able to publish with a bang. That became this film with a lot of I think, aspects coming together: film, graphic design, titling, motion design.
This is living. The mother cell divides and divides to create 4.54 billion life forms. Life cycles, lifetimes. It's the grand strategy, the original technology. Amplified by the novel, it's synthetic. It's biology. It's a bacterium, a breath, a bud, a bloom, a bird, all beasts. Microscopic miracles, monumental moments. The subject, the author. The search for the spellbinding, where the earth is electric and something silent makes its mark. It's an ancient process that the future depends on. The promise to exist, to awaken, move, grow, and renew, renew, renew. This is living. Normal phenomena of life.
I want to pitch a little bit the sentiment in the room. We could go to Q&A. I also have one more project we can go over, but I can also imagine that everyone's tired. What shall we do? We have time? We have time? Still everyone awake? Good? Okay, let's do it. So it's a fun project.
Last one, right?
Last one, promise. So, yeah, the London Design Museum called with a pitch. Now, pitches are horrible, and we actually already decided for a long time to not participate in them. But we thought, okay, we need to, you know, let them know that in a way we're very interested. So I think we wrote a really humble email back saying that we don't participate in visual pitches, but that we love what they're building on. And they invited us over for a visit, as you see, a couple weeks later. And we started to create an online magazine on the blend of ecology, science, and design called the Future Observatory Journal. And we're just taking you a bit through the process here, sketching, references, like how do we start, how do we kick off, combining typefaces, you know, also for them archiving certain material from existing works, websites that we discuss with them, what we think is not working, what we need to stay away from, what is maybe an interesting layout. And then we'll do a lot of typeset explorations. Basically what we're doing is setting up a system with already different logo executions, centered, stacked, abbreviations, with lines, without, and we just really quickly in the studio confirming, you know, what do we think is worth continuing with, what not. And then again, like with what you saw before, we create a lot of directions. We're not always keen to present those directions to the client, by the way. Like actually the status quo within the studio is that we present one thing that we fully stand behind. Sometimes it's an A-B version because Maurits and I don't agree. No, it's sometimes it's more of a variation shift. But with the Design Museum, we felt, you know, they're so much into design as well themselves, their editorial team as well, young people. So we felt we're just doing a meeting there in person and discuss, you know, all these directions. So it felt really like a mutual start. But then from on here, it's really in the studio to craft it. So we're starting with, you know, a lot of layouts, UX elements, wireframes. And these wireframes are not just purely functional. You know, it's nice to make wireframes to make a scope of work, to decide like, okay, this is what we create, confirming with the client that that is what we're going to build. But then internally, when we're going to that creative process, it needs to be parallel with type choices and with other things, because one typeface asks for a complete different proportion and sizing than others. And that is really important when creating wireframes. So it's a bit of a hybrid way of working. And then there's almost side quests within a bigger project, right? You have navigation, you have the editorial design, but also the covers. And we started with this idea of a brainstorm session, a brainstorm wall, as if the editorial team, you know, would for the first time discuss their new subject of that issue. So isolated objects, cutouts, that vibe we wanted to maintain, in contrast to what we maybe often know, a full bleed, impressive opening. This became the logo system, really minimal. As Maurits also highlighted before, we like to work type-based, and then out of the type take an element, in this case, the brackets, the lines, that actually give space to content, to meaning, and that then forms an essential element for the whole identity and the layout and the design of the website. And here you see how the bracket then suddenly in interaction also gives a new feel, contracting the type. And that's then something that, you know, a bit of a happy accident that we feel, hey, this is new, we haven't seen that. And that comes out of the bracket. So sometimes a decision to go for a certain element of a form leads you to, you know, different creative moments. This was to launch the platform. Then I think here we have a hypothetical cover. So we're only at issue 2 yet. But this was to present to the client our concept. So this is really what we build and what we make for a concept presentation, to say like, okay, this is where we want to go at. The editorial framework is broken up into 3 pieces: forecast, which is more of an immersive cinematic experience; the strategy part, which is more an overall essay; and then the practice are all case studies, interviews with studios, architects, etc. The whole identity is built out of one typeface. So, you know, stripping down ingredients, we really practice what we preach in this specific case, and only working with different cuts within that family. So, grotesque type only.
I mean, maybe the cuts are made to just use them as a family, you know? Yeah.
Here on the left you see how the bracket works, and then index, going back, and on the top you also see how it functions really to hold everything together. And then this was the first issue about bioregioning that we published. And again, you know, having that more ecological, scientific aesthetic that we want to reach with these cutouts, drawings, smaller shapes, and then one moving element. So, you know, also don't want to use too much firework. Really take one moment, that emotion here. And the second issue, which by the time that we thought we created this presentation was this case, but then we switched around actually all the images. But you can look it up yourself. All the magazines that we today discussed, Sapiens magazine, Emergence magazine, and the Future Observatory, are all ad-free and fully accessible for all the content. So you can just visit it and get access to all the content as you see fit. So, encourage you with that.
Thank you very much, Bram and Maurits. So, question time. Who's gonna break the ice?
All the way in the back.
There in the back.
So I wanted to ask, where do you guys get your references? Like the moment you get a briefing, you like start referencing immediately, you do some tryouts, or like how do you get to the idea of the design? Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's not. I mean, it really diverses from project to project. Like you have personal fascinations, of course, as Maurits earlier said. Like making your own collection of objects, books, artifacts as a designer, I think is highly important. So that's more on a personal perspective. Then when it comes at the start of a project, often it's nice to look at references, but it can also be a big trap. I think we all know this as creatives. You can get overwhelmed by the success stories, and we also realize that what we're showing today can also come over like that, and that scrolling over Instagram can sometimes also kill your creativity. So where we use references for is to really curate a certain direction and discuss with a client in an early stage to set a bit the blueprint and have mutual understanding of where we want to go. If in that phase we already notice a gap between what we think is working and what they want, then that could also be a reason to stop the project maybe. But often it leads to a feeling of an equal start where a client or co-collaborators together form the creative framework where the project has to operate in. But then there's also references for your inside the studio, and maybe Mau can speak a bit to that, what we do with the team.
No, yeah. I think references, it is a really subtle, like references can be overwhelming because there's so much out there. I think it's most important of when you like a reference, when you appreciate it, why is that? What is it that you like? And that takes time to kind of figure out. And because there's so much in your feed or whatever, you like something but you move on, and you like something and then you have this collection and then you like a lot in this collection, but take one out and maybe 10 and figure out what is it that gives that spark, and maybe you cannot put it into words. But then that's the step that is often missing, I think, because what will it give you on that moment? Not so much, but I think in the longer run you create your taste and you understand your ingredients a bit better. And also maybe figure out why did someone do it in this way, not maybe only question yourself, why do I like it, but why is it done like this? And sometimes you even figure out a structure or column work that you didn't even see at first hand, but that's why it's actually that good. So this layers behind it, and trying to figure out how another designer did something. I think that's really
I think you nailed it with this, because I think references are not to, set out a taste. It's study. It's study to look indeed what did other designers do, and maybe it's in practical matters a bit easier to explain. If you look at the website, just study different navigation models. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but first understand what works and what doesn't before you start to reinvent the wheel. So it's I think looking at references is not just, oh, I like this. No, it's really looking at it, examine it, study it, challenge yourself to really understand what good design means. Because if you come to that realization, then it can be really helpful.
Thanks for the talk. It was really nice to hear about your work. I guess what I'm really curious about is I think the translation between all of these like physical magazines and digital magazines is really interesting. And I suppose I've always felt a bit of a difficulty in being able to translate a lot of print elements into digital, like the limitations of a website, etc. And you seem to have captured this tactility and this detail really well. And I don't know if there's some insight in the process of, this detail and this touch to doing stuff like websites and editorial digitally.
Yeah. Well, I think we can both speak to from also different sides of the spectrum. Like, I think when we're creating films, we work and look at it as graphic designers. So what we often do is from each shot that we make, we create a still and we make an overview in Figma or Sketch or whatever program you're working on. Because that allows you to have a way better overview of your material. And suddenly you start to also make other visual connections and look at it as a graphic designer and look at a film as a layout. So maybe suddenly you see two images working really well together. Maybe they need to be edited, not even after each other, but with each other.
Was that the question, actually?
The connection between print and
the connection.
Film.
Yeah. Were you aiming for like how to like adapt the tactility from print into digital or not? Or was that my own take on it?
Yeah, I guess it's a kind of overall thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more like we try, I think, the tone of voice. I mean, it's a thing that we use pretty often, the tone of voice. It's more like, what is that voice? You know, everyone comes with a story, even though that's a commercial brand or Emerge magazine, they want to share something and we put it into a shape, right? And that shape has a voice. And, you know, you can pull ingredients to create that voice, but you first have to understand what is this voice and how can I change it by changing components. So often what we've done in the past is indeed working with tactile material, translating it into the digital space, maybe not literal by scanning a paper, but more like how can we create that booky environment online. So we need to take a very, you know, established book typeface that kind of, you know, evokes that same quality of that tactility in print. So it's more like the values of that, you know, quality of the tactility, can we find it also in other areas and how? But we also want to, you know, try to not, you know, use it as something that is always there, like, you know, to just give that quality to it, like what happens when we take it away. And often we are also asked by a client that wants that specific thing, but then we also tell them like, yes, we evolved in this and it's mostly Emerge magazine that we, you know, created this realm, but we also want to, you know, stay away a little by, you know, it's not a sauce. It's not like something that we just add to it because it looks good. And I think we're really aware of this. So yeah, trying new things to pull in and to find that right voice.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, first of all. I had a question about like your tools, basically, like the technical part, and also because you said before working in between analog, digital, stills, motion. Yeah, if you could give us a bit an insight to your, I don't know, tools, programs, process, whatever.
Hammer, 2 screwdrivers. No. Like, you can better talk about the technical.
Well, I mean, one really important tool that we all use is the scanner, of course. The scanner is, we have a whole range of different scanners for different purposes.
6 scanners.
So scanning is really a tool. I mean, technically, it's not rocket science. I also don't find it so interesting, to be honest, what software we're using. It's more the process of how you use it, right? So, I mean, I can tell you the software packages, but that's known to everyone. Like, what I was just trying to explain is, you know, having a hybrid approach between, for example, Premiere, where you don't have an overview, and creating an overview in, for example, Figma Sketch. But the other way around, you can also work where, you know, a film is a scene, and looking at a film and you need to make an adaptation to print, then, you know, you start to think, okay, can you use sequences, or can I add another angle to it? Can I take something from the film actually that's used there that's not been displayed in the film? For example, the Earthrise photo, it doesn't come back itself. Yeah, the film shots come back, but the photography from NASA not. So what Maurits did is, you know, take that angle and pull from a different source, and integrate that in the print edition. So the print becomes really an extension of the film rather than the same thing. They go in dialogue with each other. And I think that's more of a mindset and approach that we often try to do. We're now working on a new exhibition for Volume 6 in Berlin, and that's a really multi-dimensional project in the sense that we're, you know, now making the print in conjunction, in parallel with a film that's going to promote a theme and a physical exhibition. And just constantly thinking in that triptych allows us to, you know, come to new insights, and one influences the other. So that's basically what I can say about it.
And just extending from this, like we learned over the years that it's very interesting to have, okay, we do an adaptation into print, right? That's a really nice word to put it, but actually what you do is one story is being shared in many ways. So one is being written, and the other one is being photographed, and the one is in poetry. So the same story that wants to be shared is used, you know, different media types, I call it now, is used to actually share that same story. And each of them also needs a specific design. And I really like this because it doesn't mean that one story, you know, is written down by an author and then the next story needs to be, you know, a new story. No, it's actually, okay, we have this story. How can we create a new story from that same story? And it also challenges us as a designer to, it's frustrating because, you know, I just designed it already, and then the question comes, design it one more time, but from this angle, and then from this angle. So this frustration, now I move to another part, but I think it's important to share. I really want to share that this frustration into this whole practice, what we do, it's the core motivation actually, because it keeps us moving and diving into what we're doing, and the doubt and the frustration, you know, you can ignore it and you can move to another thing and to kind of neglect it, but it serves as a motivator, as something that you have to rather nurture, so something can grow out of it, then master it. Because mastering means it stops and you kind of sit back and you're satisfied. But on the moment when you're frustrated, you're not there yet. And when you're honest to yourself as a designer, that you know that if you ask another person, hey, what do you think about it? That's already a reason that is not there yet, because you question something, and this question is such a, you know, a voice that you can develop over years, and I feel it's a really good whisper voice in you that actually tells you, okay, one more round. Give it one more time, give it some more time, you know, and yeah, so this frustration, befriend it, you know, and make it something that, you know, can be very, because it doesn't feel like fun, but when you overcome it, you feel, I did it. I fixed this challenge, and this is all about operating on a really small level, on a small area, where you feel like you know, I don't have any options left. I already fixed it, but there's always a solution. And I more and more like to come to this place where there's, you know, it's so narrow and you're so trapped because you just have a few things to work with. But then I believe like something really magical can happen out of that. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. You work with a lot of substantive content, and I guess my question is, what's your philosophy around marrying design to that type of content? And like, how do you approach the problem and make sure that you're not distracting, I guess, from the content, and that you're balancing these elements?
I missed one word, I think. What kind of content, sorry?
Oh, substantive, like it's deep and it's more philosophical.
And how? Sorry. It was a really long day. It's a good question. So
no, it's just my question is like, how are you approaching it, like the design? Like, what's your philosophy behind designing around this type of content?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you make sure that you're balancing design with like drawing attention to the content and that they're going together and not necessarily distracting from one another?
Yeah, I believe, you know, good design is when you're not noticing it. Like, you know, there's a moment when you can be overwhelmed by an artwork, and then after a moment you actually realize I'm looking at, you know, paint on a canvas or whatever. But the same thing with a novel or a book. Like, you know, when something is over-designed, it is really nice for the design world, and for you also as a designer, because you tried out some things, but in the end, you know, how beautiful is it that one can experience, you know, something that, you know, the design is so correctly done that it serves that experience solely to, you know, the content and the one who are experiencing it. So I think that's like, you know, it's taking a lot of steps back, and it's not about making something boring, you know, but I just really appreciate that you after encountering a content that you know moves you, that you actually realize, hey, this is so well done. This is also designed. With some things you sometimes question, hey, is this designed, you know? But yeah, everything is designed. It's not that we start with this or some, you know, thinking about it, but it's more like, you know, also in the studio with the team, we're moving around, you know, we have it on the big screen and we have examples, and then everyone is a bit like on that same sentiment of like, yeah, it's nice, but is it necessary, you know, to have that color there? Not literal color, but, you know, is it? So we move around this thing like, is there one question that we ask? Yeah, why is this here? And then what's the answer? Yeah, why is it there? Because it's not, yeah, you know, and if you two questions more, then you actually realize it doesn't have to be there. And then often you're like, but then I have to let go of my design work. And I put so much effort in it, and you are kind of married with your ideas, right? But you know, how nice is it to let go of that? Because eventually you will notice, if you do it, that it becomes better. Yeah.
Here in the front office.
Thank you very much for the talk. I was wondering about the evolution of your design, especially given that the Heart Island design was, the first design was very different from what you've done and from the second design and from the designs you've been doing nowadays. So I was wondering if there are some key moments that you see within your trajectory as a studio. Yeah. And I was also wondering when you got the assignment for the Heart Island. how recent since your graduation?
Yeah, good question. So to first speak to the letter, the Heart Island was commissioned, the email that Mauro shows was 2012. So it existed 1 year. We were founded in 2011. The project, yeah, we are. The project was launched in 2015, meaning we worked for almost 3 years to it. That first version was never built. Anyway, about the style. When we started with the studio, we co-founded with the three of us, and I was even not really an understanding of what the style of the studio was. We always said that we didn't have a style. We're just creating a lot of things, and the three of us, that there was a melting pot and things came out, and I think there was a bit of a style, but it was also typographic based, but also a bit brandy and a bit more hip, or in that time, So that grew from, I think, if we look back to some still projects that we think, oh, well, that was nicely done in that time, but I think nothing that we now on an either aesthetic or conceptual level really resonate with. The first conceptual project and that's why we shared, was the Heart Island, and that was indeed quite a different style. But I think the projects along the way just shaped us. Just after that time, so before Emerge magazine, but after Heart Island, we got a couple interesting projects for the Amsterdam Art Council, a couple others that were in the art or film festival scene. So I think there we started to develop also a bit more a cultural voice, tapping indeed into graphic design as you maybe know it from the Art Academy, not per se Dutch design, but combining that with digital elements and UX and making it work on that level. And then, Emerge magazine was definitely a key moment in time because, so much came out of that almost as a kaleidoscope. And I think I also mentioned it, that at one point that also can become problematic for a studio, because then you get asked for only this tactile 60s, super, nostalgic, beautiful vibe. And that's also not what we wanted. That's also not what the team wanted. So, there was a challenge.
You outgrow that.
Yeah, you outgrow it. And also the team, so we felt really the urge, like, we need to steer this, because otherwise only those type of assignments are coming our way and people only ask us for this. And then I think the next key moment was the Normal Phenomena of Life. They came to us in 2022, so that's only 3 years ago. But I think still the last 3 years have been still pivotal for what we now do as a studio, because there's like 3-4 projects that really define, I think, who we are now, that's been created in the last 3 years. And still we're, crystallizing it together. Like end of last year, we were in Sofia in London. We had quite some time together to chat over a breakfast, which is always a good moment. And then we also come to the realization, like, hey, we're a bit in this new cycle is entering of 5 years' time. If we look back, we now almost exist. I think we're in our 14th year. So we're ending the third cycle and entering that new 5th one. And we just want to be ahead of things and already start to think like, okay, how do we stay relevant as a studio in the next 5 years and not, rest on our laurels and, that things become a trick. So there's ambitions on, more physical installations, combining the literary world with the art world and see what that can bring. And that's way less about aesthetic and more about approach and discipline that you want to operate in, and that will definitely lead to new aesthetics as well.
Thank you very much.
More questions? Or we let them rest after 5 hours of talking? Okay, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for Graham and Moritz.